In today's video, we're going to begin building this Libertywalk R35 GTR made by Aoshima. So as you can see, the body is basically primer and partially green. The front bumper is fully green. With this, I decided that I don't need to reprime the entire body and I could just move over to straight up painting. The color that I decided to go with for the body was flat aluminum, Tamiya XF16, and to thin it, of course, Mr. Color Leveling Thinner. I hit the body with 3 coats, this one being the lightest. Now yes, this coat is full coverage, but I was just basically trying to see how it worked. Second coat a little bit heavier, and the third coat the heaviest. With the first coat on the body out of the way, I decided to move over and actually paint the front bumper instead of waiting to finish the body. Nevertheless, this was really simple and I just hit it with 1 coat really quickly. Moving over to the second coat, I was pretty happy with how everything was turning out at this point, because typically this is the point where everything starts to go down the drain. Paint starts splattering, airbrush starts spitting, but all in all, everything came out pretty perfect. With the color applied to the body, I can move over to clear coating it, and to do this, I'm using Mr. Color GX100. So the footage that you're seeing right now is the third and final coat. I did a whole bunch of testing with this clear and basically realized that the wetter the clear coat, the better it'll apply. This, for some reason, took so long for me to figure out. I guess I'm stubborn, but all in all, the clear coat came out the nicest I think I've ever done in my life. With the aluminum and the clear coat laid on the body, you can see that there's hella orange peel, which is essentially that rough texturized clear finish. To fix this, we're going to do some paint correction by wet sanding it down with some 4000, 6000, and 8000 grit sandpaper. And essentially what this does is allows you to smooth out the clear coat, since it's the highest layer on the body, without actually removing any of the paint, which once the finish is smooth, you go over it with polish to essentially restore that shine and give it a nicer effect than before. I'm using Tamiya's 3-stage polish, which involves coarse, then fine, then finish, which basically has 3 different layers to give you the ultimate shine in the end. Now you could do this using an actual polishing rotary tool, but I decided to do this by hand as I'm still legit and I don't really want to mess this up. After progressing with each polishing compound, you'll start to see the shine come back. And if done properly, this extremely shiny and smooth type of effect will be left on the body, which looks a whole lot better than it was before. This paint correction can be a tedious process, as there were a few spots on the roof that I kind of maybe sanded a little too hard and sanded all the way down to paint. Unfortunately, it is what it is, but nevertheless, with more practice, I'll do it properly. Moving over from the polishing stage, there are some trims that need to be painted black around the windows. Similarly, the front grille also needs to be painted black. So to do this, I'm just going to mask the spots and then paint it black. And to do this, I'm using a fresh X-Acto blade and some Tamiya tape. The black that I used to spray off these mask pieces is Vallejo black, thinned down with some Mr. Color leveling thinner. And as you can see, I'm really satisfied with how all of this turned out. All in all, this has probably been one of the best painting sessions that I've had for a minute. And now we're going to move over to assembling it. Moving over to assembly, the first thing that needed to be thrown on were the side mirrors, and to glue these on, I just used some Bob Smith Industries Super Gold Plus. It's basically glue that doesn't dry with any fog, which is perfect for assembling body parts. Moving over to the front bumper, there were some vents that needed to be painted black, and instead of masking the entire thing off just to airbrush it, I decided to do it by hand with some Vallejo black paint. With the vents out of the way, I can move over to throwing the front bumper onto the actual body, which is really simple since there are these little tabs on the front that you can just mount it to. Following that, there's supposed to be an intercooler that goes on, but I lost it, so to supplement this, I'm just using this radiator. And with the radiator out of the way, I can move over to installing this ginormous lip splitter. Same difference. And to connect this splitter to the body, there's these splitter rods that basically glue into these little holes, like so. With a good amount of the assembly out of the way, I can move over to doing some decals, and to basically help these decals set, I'm using some micro set setting solution, which essentially allows the decal to stick to the body easier. The first two decals that need to be placed with the GTR logo that goes on the grille, followed by that, there's a decal that needs to be applied to the headlights. Following that, I could throw the actual bulb for the headlight in, and then throw it onto the car. For some reason, the actual headlight lens was a little bit too big for the kit, so I decided to go ahead and sand down the edges using some 400 grit sandpaper. As you can see, the fitment is pretty nice. It's not exactly perfect, but it's good enough. On real headlights, there's a black trim that surrounds the actual piece. To simulate this, I'm using a black Sharpie, and this basically just gives it that added effect of realism. To complement the massive splitter on the front bumper, this kit comes with 2 sets of canards, which completes the arrow and gives it an aggressive look. With the front end out of the way, we can move over to assembling the rear end, starting with the taillights. These taillights are really nice as they come with 3 separate pieces: the metallic backing, a clear centerpiece, and the outside red piece. With this kit being full of aero, the next piece that needed to be thrown on was the rear diffuser. Following that, the license plate holder and the Libertywalk license plate. The last component that needs to be thrown onto this rear bumper is this humongous wing. Fortunately, there are some slots on this rear bumper for the wing to slide into. I feel like it would be kind of difficult to actually get this to line up without it, so thank you, Aoshima. The last bit of aero that needs to be thrown onto this car are the side splitters. So these side splitters are made up of 4 pieces, 3 square pieces that connect to the side splitter in the actual fender, and then the side splitter itself. Fortunately, there are these tabs that make it a lot easier to line up these square pieces. With the side splitters added to the body, that concludes the aero. All in all, this car looks really nice. I like it. The very last piece that needs to be thrown onto the body is the windshield. And fortunately for this kit, Aoshima does provide windshield masking, so that makes it a whole lot easier to do the black trim outside of it. And just like that, with the outside of the windshield masked with some Tamiya masking tape, it's ready for paint. To spray the black trim, I just decided to use some Vallejo black. The first coat came out a little rough, but the second coat came out a whole lot nicer. I let the paint dry for around 15 minutes, then carefully removed the masking. To throw the windshield into the car is really simple because there's two tabs that sit at the roof that allow you to line it up perfectly. And with the windshield in, that wraps up all the pieces that need to be installed for the body. With everything thrown on, I'm gonna say it, this has probably been one of the best bodies that I've done in a while. Looks pretty good, not that many mistakes, and yeah, progress. With the body out of the way, that leaves the interior and the chassis left to be finished. I decided to spray the calipers yellow, but first I laid a silver base coat just because it'd be a lot easier to spray yellow on top of the silver instead of black. With spraying out of the way, we can move over to assembling the chassis. According to the instructions, the front piece of the chassis needs to be trimmed down a little bit, and to do this, I'm just using a Dremel tool. With that out of the way, we can move over to preparing the front wheel assembly, which does feature turning wheels in this kit. To heat stain the exhaust, I'm using Tamiya Weatherine Master Set D. I first apply some of the burnt blue just to give it that actual blue base coat, and come back and hit it with burnt red. And with the exhaust heat stain, we can move over to assembling it and finishing up this chassis. Another added detail to the exhaust is painting the inside of the tips black, and this gives the exhaust some depth rather than just having it look hollow. With the chassis out of the way, we can move over to detailing and assembling the interior, starting with the dashboard. With most of the dashboard and this interior being black, I added some silver to the buttons just to give it a little bit more detail. With the dashboard being fully detailed, we can move over to assembling the interior. With the interior being complete, I can move over to throwing it on the chassis and then throwing the body on top of the chassis. Throwing this body onto the chassis was definitely very tedious, as this kit has so many little pieces that are very easy to break off, such as the canard and wings. But with that out of the way, we can move over to doing the brakes and the wheel setup. The centerpiece of the rotors needs to be painted gunmetal, and to do this, I just used a toothpick and carefully traced around it. I can now move over to assembling the caliper and the rotor together, and then move over to applying the Libertywalk decal. The final detail to the brakes is darkening the actual rotor using some Tamiya panel line accenter. This dirties up the brakes and fills up the slotted rotor, so it gives the impression that the car is actually used. Now I can move over to assembling the wheels that come with the kit. As they are two-piece wheels, they come with the barrel and an actual face. That's kind of a nice detail and makes it easier for painting. Since these are the wheels that came with the kit, I didn't really have to do any adjustments to get the fitment right. The specs are pretty much dialed in, and I just had to glue it onto the body to wrap this build up.